Why, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Anime Club. I'm NikNak. With me is the great Lord Warren.
Garden of Sinners. Yoo-hoo!
Realm Shifter.
I am the Hollow Shrine.
And Seki.
Hello.
This week we watched the next two movies of Garden of Sinners. Well, one was more of a movie than the other. The other was more like a 40-minute video.
Yeah.
Short. But yeah, it was The Hollow Shrine and Paradoxical Spire.
Yes.
Amongst other names, thank you, Garden of Sinners. Name localizations.
What does it have like another set of names?
All of them have like at least two names, if not more.
Ah, okay.
Different translations.
Beautiful.
Yay. I love getting lost in translations.
All right.
So
So obviously the story is written by Nasu,
yes.
and respectively, Nasu can get fucked. Just overall, it's fine. I'm not salty.
So, I will say, I think I've come to understand, like, the duality of Shiki's personalities here, in a sense. It's their... This is actually going to be an interesting comparison, but it's like Elden Ring, where the main character, Marika, is also Radagon. And so they essentially share a dual... They share the same body, in essence, but they're two spirits. So...
I think you're right. I don't know enough about Elden Ring to know for sure about that comparison.
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously their personalities are very different from each other. And they have their own motivations and goals. So... I mean, honestly, this is, like, a really, like, I think, close comparison. But it also gives me the, like, kind of sort of the idea of, like, the alchemical Revis, the merging of the male and the female. So, that's also kind of what I see the inspiration for this as well. What?
Yeah, the alchemical Revis is a... I assume that's a real-life concept. Right?
Yeah, it's a real-life concept
yeah.
in alchemy where you'll see... What is it? Like, it's the merging of both the human and the female aspect to create supposedly, like, the perfect individual.
It would not surprise me one bit if that was the inspiration. Nasu likes his esoteric shit like that.
Yeah. I mean, literally, also, there's the parody here, or I wouldn't say, I mean, I guess it is or isn't a parody how you look at it, but the similarity between the idea of the Philosopher's Stone and the Magnum Opus, but it's called something different in here. It's called, like, the Vortex or something like that.
Yeah, the Vortex, the Void, 50 different names in Fate for it.
Yeah. So, like, it's the exact same It's the exact same concept, just slightly different to fit into Nasu's little brainchild.
Yeah, see, you're getting it. You're getting it.
Woohoo!
I assume no one else is getting it.
I think Nasu's the type of person who absolutely believes that everything Helena Blavatsky ever said she did is true.
I kind of get it because just a lot of Chinese, like, not folk. God dang it, it's all like the other kind of stuff. I don't remember.
It's not folklore. It's not folklore.
No, it's not folk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it like mythology?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like yin and yang and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
It's not that I'm not getting it, it's that I'm just not enjoying it.
Fair.
That's a separate issue.
I mean, I fell asleep during movie 4.
The Hollow Shrine was not a particularly stunning example.
No, it was more like this episode or Hollow Shrine felt like more like in a way an exposition dump to me. It felt like is that this is more so context for us to try, however much the audience understands it, really. Try and get us to understand the concept of what Shiki, or rather who Shiki is, both aspects. Also kind of builds a little bit of the relationship that Yogi Shiki, the feminine side, has with the main character guy. I can't think of his name.
He's not really the main character, but yeah, Kokuto.
Kokuto, yeah. He's
Yeah,
not really
but-
the main character in this story.
It doesn't change the fact that this is not an interesting way to do it.
No.
Nor was it a particularly engaging one. and it did not really endear me to the character or anything that was going on behind it.
No.
Like, despite any intention, you can have the best of intentions and still produce something that's generally unenjoyable to watch on its own.
I think that's a matter of perspective in this case, because I at least reasonably enjoyed this episode. Like, it was, I definitely say the next episode after Hollow Shrine is more interesting than this one, but I wouldn't say that this is the worst thing I could watch.
I feel like Vorn maybe understands where I'm coming from. This was boring.
Yes.
I like it a lot, actually. It's like, because it's entirely a character piece. This one is.
But you can do character... I don't know. Maybe this is just my opinion. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't interesting. And maybe that's because I think that Shiki's character would have been better fleshed out if we had just gotten more little bits throughout the rest of the series that added up to a whole that you had to put together as we were going, and not had a chunk of it just dumped on us in a 45-minute segment.
They have been, though.
I
That's
know.
the point of the out-of-order storytelling.
I get it. They have been. I've been enjoying more so piecing it together bit by bit, right? This dumping it on me was unenjoyable compared to how I've been experiencing it for the last 3 movies, in my opinion.
I don't know, like, for me, this is... I don't know that I agree that it's a full dump, though. For me, it's the same type of film as, albeit a much shorter one, if you've ever seen the movie where the guy gets his arms... It's based on a true story. He gets his arm stuck in a rock, and the entire film, he's in that one spot, slowly trying to build up the character.
Never seen that. I don't even know what that is.
It's a famous story. Have either of you guys seen it before?
Not really.
Which one?
It's a story of a hiker that fell and a rock jammed his arm between... he got his arm jammed in a rock and was stuck there for days. The entire thing is him basically sitting there dying until he works up like the character resolve to basically cut off his own arm and get out of there. Like, it's a in the same spot film, and it's just going through his character.
This is a series of movies, right? And up till now, we've been getting... I'm not saying you're wrong. So far, we've been getting little bits of Shiki's character and everyone else bit by bit, and we've been putting it together kind of like a puzzle piece, like a mystery to solve. And it's been somewhat interesting because it's something that, she does something and you don't know why, but then you might get a little bit of thing and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, and that connects to this. And then all of a sudden, 3 movies in, we just get a 45-minute dump all about her without really, much else to break it up. It doesn't feel like... Well, first of all, it doesn't feel like a movie because it's 45 minutes, right? It doesn't feel like an episode, though, because it's 45 minutes, and that's too long to be an episode. Instead of, us getting to do a lot of, piecing together and figuring it out ourselves and relating her actions to her character, it's just, here's everything you need to know in much plainer terms now, because we don't, you were taking too long to figure it out, or we didn't give you enough to figure it out in 3 movies so far, but we need you to have it figured out for the next movie. So let's just dump 45 minutes of content on you and then move on.
I think the thing, though, with it, I will agree with you that I think that Shiki is, the least interesting person here. I think I can never remember any of the characters' names in this series for the life of... Yeah, Toko, the detective, or the lady.
Toko.
Yeah, Toko.
We love Toko.
Yeah. She was definitely a far more interesting character, I think, here, and I think that's because we're meant to start kind of caring about her. So you're right, Seki.
Respectfully, Toko is great. I will take no arguments on that fact.
Yeah.
Why would I argue it?
Toko is amazing. She only gets better.
Yeah.
Toko Aozaki is my waifu.
We haven't even started waifu wars.
Bruh, not even for this episode. Toko is my waifu in general.
All right.
NikNak knows what I mean.
Yeah.
All right then.
That's the problem though, is that this, at least for me, and then Vorn can chime in with how he felt, but this focuses so much on just Shiki and dropping us lore that's focused on her that I feel it doesn't feel like the rest of the movies. It doesn't feel like I'm actually getting to experience any of the rest of the characters, really. It kind of feels like it's like it would almost be more properly in place if you had cut it up into maybe a couple of 5 to 10 minute segments and drop those segments in the other movies, in the next movie and in future movies, to sort of keep up with that. Here, let's give a little bit here and a little bit there and then piece it all together as we go.
I disagree, but that's my opinion here. I disagree.
Yeah, just like my thoughts on it, this movie was very just bland, and the other ones, they weren't bland, but like they also wasn't like the most greatest things ever. But if you actually did, but it's because that shift change right there between like the okay, this is pretty nice and interesting to just bland, it kind of wrecks it for me, and that's kind of probably the reason why I fell asleep anyway.
I mean, it's not as if the problem continues on to movie number 5. Movie number 5 was fantastic.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I have no issues with movie number 5 comparatively. I think maybe just because this just feels so disjointed and different, and maybe that was intentional, but I don't like it.
I think you made a good, like, what was it, observation, I guess we'll call it. That they, if they, it like, basically it's saying, the show is saying, like, okay, if you haven't gotten Shiki's character by now, bonk, here you go. We're moving on now, so that way we can focus on other things.
And I'm not mad, per se. It just, am a little disappointed. I almost wish this had been a full-length movie. Make this a full movie. Shiki can still be the focus, but include other stuff. Make this like an hour and a half long movie.
Yeah, because like
don't make it 45 minutes. Make it 90 to 100 minutes. Make it a full movie. Add more on the other characters to flesh out what's happening as like around Shiki as we're getting the Shiki stuff.
Yeah, because
I'd be much happier.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the next one after this ends up being like basically a full movie. It's almost
It's
2
an
hours.
hour.
It's
an
almost
hour and
2
14
hours.
minutes.
The next one is feature length.
Yeah.
This one is feature length.
The Hollow Shrine is absolutely not feature length.
I think and it's just that's the difference. Is like I understand because this one feels like an OVA, the next one feels like a movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can get that.
Yeah.
The Garden of Sinners movies are, I don't want to say they're pace worthy, but they're definitely they're not all feature length, and it ends up feeling a little odd when you're watching them.
Maybe if they did it as like a small add-on to the second movie, maybe, I don't know.
And just include it in the second movie. You know,
Yeah.
include it in another movie. Make another movie longer. I think I would have been happier, at least for number 4. I have no such issues with number 5.
Yeah, 5 was nice.
5 was great.
I don't know. Like, I don't want to. 4 is absolutely not my favorite Garden of Sinners movie, but like I can't help but get defensive over here. I feel like this is unfair. Well, I think where I'm at
Maybe
is
if I was watching it for the second or third
a
time.
big thing you're saying is that this does not feel like the other ones that came before it, but the other ones that came before it are also tonally disconnected and dissimilar. That's kind of a point of contention that we had in the previous discussions, was that 1 was very Fever Dream-esque, 2 was a mystery, and the third one is a lot more of a straightforward story.
Yeah, but 1, 2, and 3 all had like other things in common that or separate them from this.
Yeah, they had a little bit more of like a draw to them versus this, which is
1, 2, and 3 all felt like stories about multiple characters. This felt like an OVA about a single character that would have been placed like in the middle or end of an anime series.
1 barely had any characterization in it at all. That's the problem with 1.
yeah, but 1 like
But
you
one-
could infer a story and like you could then.
But I'm
think, like,
not.
oh, what's happening? If I was like reading this as a book, like 1, 2, and 3 would be kind of its own separate book, and then like
I wouldn't put 1, 2, and 3 in the same book if this was.
That's
one.
how
no,
they're
like-
structured, actually.
Are
1,
they
2,
all
and
in the
3
same
are like
book?
short stories in the same book. 4 and 5 are in a book, and then the remaining ones are. I think the remaining ones might be separate books, so they might be in one book. I don't remember.
and then like 4.
And then there's like an epilogue that was
Yeah.
released as a separate, I think, manga.
Yeah, and like 4, I would maybe consider that like as like a side story, really.
4
That's
feels like
me.
the Naruto side stories, like Itachi's story,
Yeah.
where it like explains his reasoning and why he is what he is.
Except Shiki's the main character. This is her story.
Yeah, it just. It
I know
didn't
you care more about like
feel
Coco
it.
and the other characters, but Shiki is the main character. This is not a side story.
Yeah,
This
and
is her
that's
development.
fine. So if I like other characters more, that's just the fault of the way that the story's coming across.
Honestly,
You know?
the next episode after this one definitely made me like Shiki's character more. This made me. This one made me understand her character. The next episode makes me actually like her as a character.
Because like 1 and 3, they feel like actual stories, and 4 is just like, here's the exposition that should have been kind of explained to you. This is the explanation if you didn't get the explanation. So yeah, sorry. It's not that. Yeah, 4 is just. It's not bad, but they could definitely written it way better.
I'm gonna be honest here, 4 is still not my favorite. It is not amongst my favorite Garden of Sinners movies, even in the slightest. But the characterization of it as an exposition dump, as opposed to, even if you don't care for it, as opposed to a character piece, that's what gets me, because it's not an exposition dump on Type Moon lore. It contains Type Moon lore in there. It does have esoteric
But
concepts.
we didn't say it was an exposition dump on Type Moon lore. We said it was an exposition dump on Shiki.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
That's
as
different.
a story, it is literally Shiki at her lowest clawing herself out of that point. That is the point of that part of the story.
Yeah, it just. I'm sorry to say this, but it really didn't feel like it was her clawing herself out at that lowest point right there. It just felt like we were just. I don't know exactly how to explain it on that, but it didn't feel like that. So yeah.
Like, I mean, I know I explained like the esoteric concepts, but also understand that's actually what made me like this episode in and of itself. Like, if I didn't like those esoteric concepts as a thing, also honestly probably helps me that it relates to Elden Ring, or at least that's how I can come to understand it. That's actually what makes me kind of like this episode in a sense. But I also understand where Vorn and Seki's criticism of this episode are coming from. It is a very, like, straightforward episode in comparison to the rest of the ones where there's a lot more mystery. There's a lot, and, you know, if you're not, like, privy to these esoteric concepts, I would honestly say that these would just even leave you more confused if you don't get the point that this is just trying to talk about Shiki's character and her characterization and her lifting herself up from a very low point. I think that, honestly, the fact that I even have this context, I might have hated this episode.
I do actually have a question. Is the hotel in 5 what we fought in, like, the Garden of Sinners Fate?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Got it.
Yeah, I recognize that. I was like, oh, right, I remember going through this tower in our D&D
where I
campaign.
started a blood feud with a servant.
Yep.
So this movie is dead ass probably my favorite anime movie of all time.
No, 5's fucking
Oh,
fantastic.
yeah, no, that's definitely great. Yeah.
5's
Yeah.
amazing.
Like, I didn't want to come out here and stand and die on a hill for 4.
But you really were trying to die on a hill for 4
That's
there.
because 4 is so important for Shiki's character, but we're done with 4.
Yeah, but like 5, oof, man. 5 made me feel good.
Yeah.
5 was great, wasn't it, Peachy? You watched it with me.
I can see the empty thoughts currently in her head.
See, this is what 5 made Peachy feel like. She's purring.
See, I love the... I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I love the story structure. We end up with, like, this very incomplete, but, like, in line with other Garden of Sinners movies stories that just ends abruptly. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh shit,
No, that was
this
nice.
is not a great ending. Go back. I love that story structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also, it kind of brought back that almost, like, fever dream aspect of the show for me because of, like, the way some of the scenes are structured. Like, I guess one scene that comes to mind is, I still can't remember his fucking name. The main, not the main character, but the main male character. Toma. Where he's going over to Shiki's house and he's like, oh, he's not here. But then he's also, like, giving something to another character. There's, like, this weird, like, disconnect between, like, what's going on and, like, what has actually happened and just, like, bunch of other weird shit that I really liked about this series, or about this episode in particular.
But unlike the first movie, there's a story you can actually understand.
Yes,
Yeah.
by this point, because now I understand a little bit more about Shiki and the rest of the cast and what we're working with here exactly, I feel like I can actually follow what's going on here, even though we've got all these really weird scene transitions that are kind of meant to be a little bit confusing, but make sense as the series goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Also, arguably, the best part of this entire movie, I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt, and guess what's inside it? Toko Aozaki's head.
Yeah.
No, this was fun.
Yeah.
This was it, which movie did I really like? Was it 2 that I liked?
2 was the one you really liked.
Yeah, this reminded me of 2. I think not in terms of the story, but like what's the word for it? Not like tonally. This tonally reminded me of 2. And it was very fun and energetic.
Yeah.
Also, it was nice to see Shiki not like genuinely struggling.
Yeah.
You know?
Like the more confident Shiki.
Yeah.
We're at this point we're done with the actual like main movies being out of order, so I can sort of years later, and I do not put any fault if you guys don't piece this together, because it is not the best handled in my opinion. I've sort of realized that the reason the movies are out of order is because the entire thing is basically a flashback. It's Shiki going over her life, where the fuck did I go wrong kind of deal.
Yeah.
And this is sort of the end of that flashback. That's why the last movie was sort of her basically figuring her shit out.
Yeah.
But that's why she feels a lot more fully realized here.
Yeah.
I don't actually like how that's handled exactly, but that's what they were going for, at least.
I think that's fair. I just think that this was a fun movie.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel like October was a great time to watch this movie.
Oh, definitely.
It did feel very suspense and thriller-esque.
And then also just the realization where, like, we see Toka, like, the one, like, the double of her get killed. And then all of a sudden, oh, she's here again. Like, I kind of suspected that was the twist that was going to come in. Like, there's no way she dies that easily. Yeah.
Remember, people die when they are killed, except in Garden of Sinners, where they just don't die, but
Except-
are sometimes dead.
Except not really, because that doesn't work in any of the type moons. So Garden of Sinners, you have fucking Toko. Tsukihime is about vampires. And Fate Stay Night's about dead people being summoned back to life.
Right.
Constantly.
Like, that entire phrase is just false across type moon.
Like I said,
Yeah,
remember,
actually.
people die when they are killed, except they don't die when they're killed, and sometimes they're just dead to begin with.
Yeah.
Yep.
And sometimes they're just alive. Paradoxically, one could say.
No, they need magic. That's the only quantifier. They need magic.
Exactly.
I feel like that's not a full quantifier, though. Like, some of the people don't really have magic, and yet they still end up, not dead or dead when they
Right.
should be one or the other.
Like, literally, all those brains just sitting in the basement of the apartment
Yeah.
complex. They didn't have any magic inclinations.
Yum. Brain cheese.
Brain cheese.
Oh my goodness. It was fucking great.
But yeah, I did actually catch that, like, detail as well at, like, the start of this, where the character he was stabbing is like the puppet of his mom, where there was no blood on the knife, but he still, yeah.
That's what I watched this with my brother when he watched it for the first time, and that was like one of the best moments. Was like, blood doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Why? Where's the blood? Blood doesn't work like that. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah. Hinting at what's coming next.
Yep. Yeah. So that was, like, fun with this whole episode. Also, like, I did mention, like, how this episode made me kind of like Shiki's character a little bit more as well, because you got to kind of see, like, the kind of person that she is for the most part when she's not just, like, interacting around, like, the office, and she's not just, like, at her lowest point in her life. So that was enjoyable to see.
She's one of the dudes, the apartment with just the mattress.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's that.
And a pile of trash in the sink.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Fucking beautiful.
Yep. Yeah. She's just one of the bros, apparently. Yeah.
I mean, if any of us were to, like, go out and actually didn't have to bring anybody over, we probably would just have a mattress in the corner.
Yeah.
I've never done that.
Just but you invite people over.
I actually have lived sleeping on a pile of clothes in the center of my room on the floor. Ironically, I had a bed and a mattress at the time.
But you chose to sleep on a pile of clothes.
Well, the thing is, I had stolen my parents' portable DVD player for car journeys, like taking it from the box that was upstairs and down into my room. And then I spent 6 months before they found out playing The Lord of the Rings, the extended edition, and all the background content every single night instead of sleeping. And the only way to hide it, because it had to be plugged in constantly because the movies were so long the battery didn't last, was to hide it under the pile of clothes where I was sleeping.
interesting childhood memory facts from Seki.
This was in
everyone.
middle school.
This is interesting middle school history facts with Seki, everybody.
I had a mattress.
Yeah, you had a mattress. You just were, for lack of a better word, a kleptomaniac.
No, I was just desperate for Lord of the Rings.
That too. But also, actually, I think your kleptomaniac tendencies have retained over, considering the wall behind.
I think you might be using the word kleptomaniac incorrectly, because I did not steal any of this stuff.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this is just my hoarding.
Yeah, this is your
Yeah.
hoarding. Yes.
Yeah.
Kleptomaniac would be appropriate for the other one, since it was your parents' DVD player.
Well, technically it was mine. I just wasn't allowed to use it when we weren't on car trips. Because they didn't want me watching too much TV.
Too much TV.
It will ruin your eyes, you know?
Move glasses up.
I almost wonder if maybe you still would have had your eyesight had you not ruined your eyes.
Oh no, that ship had long sailed. We all know that my eyesight is bad because what I used to do is I used to turn on the light in the bathroom and then that light reflect off this door and into my room faintly and then read a book trying to get it into that light at night after my parents went to bed.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah.
That'll do it. So, ironically, it wasn't your copious amounts of late night Lord of the Ring watching. It was your reading!
Yep. But yeah, no, I would never be a mattress on the corner person. I need more things.
So, Realm, how about you in the mattress on the corner?
And
Yeah, Realm.
Yeah. I did end up getting a frame for it eventually.
After some insistence from family.
Eventually.
After some insistence from my mother, I did end up getting a frame for my mattress because I wanted to try doing like just the tatami mat on the floor, see how that would turn out. Turns out, American apartment bedroom floors are way too hard for that shit. Even with carpet.
Also, if you're not used to sleeping on a tatami.
That too.
Because, like, we, at least here in the West, we grow up typically sleeping on mattresses, and mattresses have a very different texture and feel.
Yes.
So even a mattress on the floor is very different than a tatami, and it takes time to get used to a new sleep routine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it took me, 2 weeks in Greece before I could manage to sleep properly through the night. You know? It's a different mattress, felt different, you know?
Right.
I mean, sleep on the floor feels great for me, but I've done that a while.
I mean, I sleep on the floor, too. It's called floor time.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Every so often, you just need to sleep on the floor.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to fall asleep right outside your next classroom for university.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever done that.
Sometimes I just feel the need to roll around on the floor to get my back to lay on something hard.
You know what? Actually, that's a lie. I have definitely fallen asleep in a library cubicle in the middle of writing a thesis. That's a lie. I have actually done that. But there's carpet there.
No, I fell asleep on the floor of a hall that I'd be willing to tell you off recording, like on the tiled floor, while waiting for class. I had some friends near me. I was safe.
Bruh. You know there are nap rooms on our campus, right? You can go to the Union and get a nap room with a bed.
Or I could fall asleep on the tile floor.
I fell asleep at my desk in high school.
Everyone's done that at least once.
I haven't.
I've
Like, you don't sleep. We've already acknowledged that.
Yeah.
I've rested.
Guess I'm just built different.
on the desk, but I've never actually full on fell asleep in class.
Look, anything can be comfortable when you've gone and work closing shift at Target with 2 hours of sleep.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh,
Including
yeah.
your steering wheel mid-driving on the freeway.
I was actually just gonna say, the driver's seat of my car on the freeway after an 8-hour overnight at Amazon.
Yes.
There's a reason I started drinking cold brew coffee. I think we're off topic. Let's get back before we
Let's
reveal
get
that
back
we've
to
committed
Garden of
other
Sinners.
felonies.
Let's get back to the Garden of Sinners before this becomes a lore episode on the Anime Club.
So, okay, I'm gonna be the Tight Moon fan. No one needs to engage with this because this is Tight Moon deep cut. I did not experience this my first 2 times watching, but this time watching, when I heard, I forget his name, the blonde guy, the blonde villain, like, call Toko, like, misread or Scarlet Red or something like that. Cornelius, yeah.
Cornelius.
I was just like, oh, you're fucked now. Because that's a thing with her, is you never call her Red to her face. And Alba, the main villain, knew she was still alive and listening.
Oh.
Yep. So I did
that's
not
a
catch
Type
that.
Moon deep cut.
Yeah. That's why I was like, this is entirely indulgent for myself to bring that up. But I don't know. I could be wrong here, so if y'all want to bounce other ideas off me here. Thematically, do you guys think that this was a commentary on the way that urban society drives us to be our worst selves?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's definitely shit design out there, I can tell you already.
Like, obviously, it's all maged up. Like, this is specifically... this is being done to do this yin-yang thing. But that felt like the commentary of the film for me.
Yeah, well, no, what I got from it is just like how everyday life can sometimes take its toll on people, and sometimes all it takes is one bad day for someone to end up in a terrible place.
Maybe.
I will say this, there have been studies that, like, I don't remember which era, but their office buildings quite literally could drive people insane. Just the office building structure, if you were walking down those halls.
Well, I mean, an office building is not exactly conducive to, and like a traditional office building, an office work environment is in large part not traditionally conducive to like a great work environment or mental health day in any way, because traditionally the way the office buildings are built with cubicles and stuff like that, they're meant to isolate you, right? In a way. And like, as humans, we are social creatures. We get around that isolation most of the time. You make friends with your cubicle mates. You pop up over to talk to one another. But the whole point of the way that they're designed is meant to isolate people. And the theory behind that is, it'll keep you on task if you're not distracted by other people. But humans are social creatures, and we're more distracted and in our heads when we're not around other people, right? There's a reason why people left on their own, right? In like certain situations, like there's a famous story about a man who like sailed around the world on a boat all on his own, right? Or like Robinson Crusoe, right? People left on islands, or people who are deserted in the middle of nowhere don't end up well mentally, right? Because humans are, if nothing, how huskies are really, really smart and they need a lot of enrichment? Humans are like huskies. We need a lot of enrichment. And enrichment can't just be like chopping down a tree for us. Our enrichment needs to involve like talking to other people, right? And like actually exchanging opinions and views and thoughts, right? So like office buildings are, in every sense of the word, traditional ones, not meant to promote proper mental health for the humans. Right? Like, they're just not. It's not designed to work great. Like, the fact that you're stuck in a cubicle at a desk makes you not only sedentary, which is not great for humans, but also socially isolated. That is why water coolers and, like, the water cooler meme became a thing, right? Because you get up from your desk and you go see other people and seek out enrichment.
Yeah. Or like the coffee pot, for example.
Yeah.
That's also like a variation of the water cooler.
Yeah.
The printer.
Yes, that too.
Yeah. Any place in the office where there are not walls dividing you from your fellow workers and people watching to make sure that you're not popping up over your walls to talk to one another.
Yeah. So there's that. Yeah. So there's that. I mean, I'm pretty sure this has been done, but I wouldn't doubt it that there's been like studies that like if you took a bunch of people that they look at like pictures of like an office setting or
it's depressing
buildings.
most of the time.
It's depressing. Most of them they might associate it with like feelings of anxiety or depression or like just their normal day job.
Gray, sterile.
Yeah.
I mean, I work in office job and I turned out perfectly fine.
Yeah, but you also work from home most of the time.
You were on calls.
Yeah.
You weren't like typing at a computer.
Yeah.
Well, that wears away at my mental health too. Don't
But
get
in
me
a
wrong.
different way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, you do work from home mostly, NikNak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have a dog. That's your enrichment.
I didn't always, but when I was working primarily out of the office pretty consistent, I was mostly in the file room, which itself was a no windows, four walls room where I was
But
in
did you
alone
have
most of the time.
coworkers?
Not in the file room.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
off on my own. I could do whatever I wanted in there.
That's fair.
Yep.
Anyways,
Yeah, back
we've
on
gotten
topic
off
again.
topic again.
I know. I had more to say, but I was just realizing. Oh yeah, we're off topic again.
I'm so sorry. Continue.
Yeah. Well, so anyways, aside from the societal commentary aspect of this particular episode.
Oh, that's what we were discussing.
Yeah.
Yes, the importance of the importance of architectural planning.
Yeah.
Oh, I have opinions on that. I forgot that was what we were discussing, though.
Yeah, that's what.
Go
That's
ahead
how this
if you want to go off
That's
on
all.
that.
That's how this topic got brought up. So.
I'm so sorry. No, I meant like not necessarily in regards to Garden of Sinners, but like in the general sense, I have opinions on architectural design in cities, like as like a city planning, from a city planning perspective, because I've taken a class where we discussed like urban planning, right? And so that means I've spent a fair amount of time looking at urban planning in like major cities in the US, major cities in Europe and in Asia, and like the way that urban planning is supposed to make you feel, right? And the way that urban planning can then be used by some people to physically make you feel uncomfortable in your surroundings.
I mean, if you strip back all the magecraft, this entire film was about how bad urban planning and bad societal structure caused the destruction of a family.
Yeah.
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 Also, I mean, I already hated it before this, but also the understanding more. This made me hate Suburbia because, like,
Suburbia is awful.
yeah,
I'm sorry. I understand why Suburbia became a thing, but Suburbia is and when Suburbia was first implemented, it wasn't as awful as it is now, right? Suburbia at its original implementation was a flawed design, but it was a design that worked for what it was. Suburbia does not work these days, right? Because the idea of Suburbia is that you have space, right? So you're not living in an apartment. You have space. You've got a yard. You have a place to put your car. You have a place to raise your kids. And that is, in theory, good, right? Like, you've got a place to put your car that you don't have to pay for, right? And you don't have to fight for a space, unlike an apartment in a city. You've got green outdoors for your child or your pet to run around, which is nicer than just being in an apartment building. And to be fair, in an apartment building, you could get around that by having a park, but this is your space, right? You have a private yard to do stuff. That's wonderful. That's nice. You have a little bit more space. That's wonderful for a family. You want to host family. You want to have people over. Like, that's great. But then the other part of Suburbia that is true to its original implementation is Suburbia is supposed to nurture relationships between you and your neighbors, right? You're all on the same level. You're all seeing each other on the day-to-day. Everyone's children can play together. Everyone can walk their pets together. You see one another. But that is not how Suburbia works these days. In most suburban neighborhoods, you are not making friends with all of your neighbors, right? Not unless you live in a very sort of traditionally style Suburbia where your neighbors, and traditionally this happens when your neighbors are older and they invite you in to that sort of event. Like, for example, my neighborhood used to do that, right? Like, we used to have neighborhood events, like one family would host, everyone would come over to the backyard, you have a barbecue, play bocce ball, like just, generally have like a whole neighborhood party on like special events or on like holidays, but that doesn't happen anymore because a new family moves in and they have their own friends, which is entirely valid. I'm not blaming new people moving in, but as people die off, new people move in, but they don't move in at the same rate. People move in randomly when houses become vacant, and then they're not part of the existing neighborhood dynamic, right? And if the neighborhood does not invite them in, they become separate from it, and then as more people leave, the neighborhood dynamic becomes weaker, and because they didn't incorporate the new people don't help strengthen this neighborhood dynamic, and people, once again, have their own friends, which is entirely valid, but that means that they don't feel the need to interact with their neighbors. They will just invite their friends over when they want to spend time with people.
Well, the cultural structure of society has completely shifted from the implementation of Suburbia.
I know.
Yeah.
I have such a big... Oh my god, you need to get off this topic or I will keep going.
Realm, you sounded like you had some stuff you had on your mind.
Well, no, I mean, so...
Or was it on like one of the other topics?
No, and Seki definitely, like, brought, like, what I wanted to say as well. And honestly, I think that this what I want to say is just going to go off on too much of a tangent because it gets okay. All right, we're going down this rabbit hole then. So why I also hate the idea of the privatized housing sector, at least over here in America specifically, is because the way that housing has changed is now it's considered an asset. And that's how and that's how a lot of these like bigger corporations that buy all this land and make all this housing, it's essentially how they store their wealth now, because they can't just keep cash. They have to keep the money circulating and keep it somewhere, and as a store of wealth, they buy these large swaths of land and they build all these single family
Parcel them out.
Yeah, parcel them out, suburbia single family homes. And that's why the housing market is so royally screwed over here in America, because these properties are treated like assets instead of what they should be, a house for someone to live in.
Well, and in addition, they build these houses, and because they're investing a ton of money, they don't pay as much attention to how much money they're investing, right? So they'll spend a certain amount of money on a bunch of these homes, right? But for it to be a proper investment, you need to have a certain rate of return, right? And to have a certain rate of return, let's think you pay the materials, you pay the builders, you pay the people selling the houses, you pay for the maintenance of the neighborhood, right? So you need to get a return on all of that, plus then you also need an additional percentage on top that you would consider profit, right? Because you're not renting these, you're selling these. So once it's sold, it's lost, which means you need to make back everything that you want to make back in one go, right? So that means let's build, say 50,000 homes, right? That's actually happening near us. They're putting in like 50,000 new homes near us, right? But all of the houses they've built are very fancy. Most of them are 2-story, single-family homes nominatively, but like single-family homes with like 5 bedrooms and 2 baths, right? Single-family homes for people who are established and wealthy, right? Houses starting at $1 million. And the problem is, we need housing. Housing is wonderful. We need housing. We don't need housing starting at $1 million.
You want to know the reason also why? It's because of land cost as well. Land has costed so much more versus now, which has also resulted in smaller pieces of land, which if you want a 2-car
But they want the same size house on those smaller pieces of land. So if you look at the newer suburban developments, often you'll notice backyard sizes are much reduced. There's usually no pathways down the side that are traversable for more than one person going one direction, and there's not much of a lawn anymore. It's mostly just a garage and a tiny little patch of either grass or rock in some cases.
Along with also cars have gotten bigger, which thus means your garage, which has actually kind of stayed the kind of same size as I think the 90s about right now.
But you still need a big garage, because usually you want a 1 to 2 car garage, and if it's a 2-car garage, it's got to be big, right?
Yeah.
And then also your driveway has to be large, because your driveway has to be big enough to fit a. And this is in general, this is what they go by, is that most houses are built with a driveway big enough to fit a 4-door Ford F-150 full size without the car encroaching onto the sidewalk, right? Because you can't have the car encroach onto the sidewalk, otherwise it's a hazard for people walking on the sidewalks that are designed into it, right? So the driveway has to be large to begin with, right? Yeah. So that obviously takes away space from what would have been your front yard. And so land prices are up, housing prices are up, and yes, it's still a valid investment to put your money into creating suburbia housing, right? But you don't consider the end cost for the buyer when you're doing that.
Right.
And the people you're trying to attract, obviously you want to attract people who can pay that money, but we don't have that many people who can pay that money.
Right.
That is an exorbitant amount of money. A starter home is not $1 million, right? New families don't often have the cash capital to spend $1 million on a home. Children are expensive. Children are increasingly expensive. And children are expensive because children require an entire host of things that through capitalism have become more and more expensive. You have to have a crib. You have to have a stroller. You have to have a car seat. You have to have a children's toy. You have to have children's clothing.
You have to regularly buy diapers, all kinds of things.
And this stuff is either disposable or it's only useful for a certain amount of time. So you can't even justify the cost of what you're paying by cost to wear, right? Children grow so fast, you could buy a pair of pants, they'll be grown out of them before they can even wear them out, right?
Yeah, that's the reason why hand-me-downs are now big thing.
Like, it's insane. Like, yes, they're using houses and land as essentially a form of investment banking, but it's not benefiting anyone.
Except the bankers.
Even them. I mean, they can't sell the houses. If they build that many houses for that high a price in one place, they can't sell those easily.
Yeah, you
and
just
quickly.
run out of demand right there for the
Yeah.
houses, so you just have a shit ton of supply.
The houses sit empty?
But they don't care if the demand isn't going because, well, yes, they spent all this money to go into building this capital. That house isn't going down in value. It's just gonna keep.
Yeah,
It's just gonna
pretty
keep
much.
going up.
No, that house will go down in value.
Well,
in some ways.
It depends. Like, I mean, even if like the supply, though. I mean, obviously, we saw more of this again with like the COVID recession when it happened again. But the thing is like even like this isn't even just like simply a supply and demand issue. It's just like a market store of wealth issue.
But here's the thing, right? The house does not go down in value as to what it's posted in the market. The house remains $1 million, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not
Yeah.
going to sell for less than that.
Yeah.
But the ongoing cost of maintaining the property, upkeeping the outside, making sure that it looks ready for its showtime, making sure that no one's breaking in and occupying it.
Yeah.
And then additionally, you are still sitting on the cost of the land in terms of tax, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And beyond that, inflation is still going up, right? So the cost of the house, the value of it is going down consistently for the owner until it's sold with every single month that it sits empty. So then that incentivizes them to raise prices, but the product has already been built. The product is not increasing in value. So they raise the price without the product going up in value at all because they need to make back more and more and more the longer it sits empty.
Yeah.
Which means you're getting less bang for your buck the longer a house sits empty.
Yeah.
Now, also, here's the thing. They've also started to realize this as well. Thus, they've also then started turning these into rental properties. And because of how the tax system works for them in terms of rental properties, they get a little kickback due to technically the house actually depreciates. At least the government considers it depreciating.
But
So yeah,
rental properties lower the popularity and the rating of the neighborhood,
yeah,
which then devalues the rest of the houses and the overall suburban development.
Yeah.
If you offer the properties for rental, the entire development appears to go downhill because you couldn't sell them and you can't get people who can afford to buy them outright. They can only afford to rent them. So you devalue the entire neighborhood, which in the end still means that this house is significantly decreasing in value month by month, causing the rest of the houses around it to decrease in value month by month while you keep those prices raised because you need to make back a certain amount of money.
yeah.
Meaning that they are still unaffordable for the people that need them
Yep.
and undesirable for the people that can buy them.
Yeah, unless you're going to be looking as like these rentals as investments, which then they actually kind of look pretty profitable for people.
But once again,
So, yeah.
it being a rental still drives down property value.
And at that point, why didn't you just build a rental high rise?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Why didn't you just build an apartment building? It would have been more affordable at that point. Now, that's not to say that they're not also putting in, at least, in most places, tons of apartment buildings now.
Yeah.
We have never had as many apartment buildings where we live as we have had built in the last couple of years. They have put in thousands of apartments near where we live in just since COVID.
and that's kind of
And they are expensive apartments. That's the other part. They are not cheap apartments. They're not putting in affordable apartments. They're putting in $2,000 a month apartments.
Yeah. And these are for like 1 bedroom, 1 bath apartments.
Yep.
These aren't even like 3 bedroom, like 2 bath or whatever apartments.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, because they also want faster return on their investment as well.
Yeah.
And you get a faster return if you have 1 bedroom, 1 bath. You don't really want long-term families staying in your rental, because if you have people staying long terms in your rental properties, rent is controlled. You cannot keep raising it beyond a certain amount. So you don't actually want good long-term tenants. You want high-paying short-term tenants where you can raise the rent in between every tenant.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for our TED Talk of the housing market in the United States.
I have my own thing to pop in there, but I'm not gonna, because that does technically give away the wonderful state we live in.
Actually, we've already given it away on accident.
We've
We
done
mentioned it
a couple
in
times.
Christopher Columbus and William Tell because we were talking about the specific school system. So if it's state specific, go for it.
Go for it.
The wonderful state of California, a while back, passed through direct democracy, a proposition that I don't want to get into the weeds of it too much, but if you want to know the effect it has on the market, it's basically the same way that rent control inevitably ends up driving up value on property for new tenants. It has to do with how the taxation works for selling, how when you're buying and selling, how it gets reevaluated. There was a law that was passed, so the effect is basically the same as rent control, except on like owned homes. So you get a better deal by not selling. That's why rent has become so much more popular in California for landlords instead of just selling the property, because that property value is never going to go
Be as high as it was when you first had it.
Yeah, and that's why buying property only gets more and more expensive, because they're not selling to make it go lower.
And then additionally, as people who live in California, we pay some of the highest tax in the entire United States of America. Is it 12% income tax?
Something like that.
That's for like the low bracket.
Yeah.
Too. What?
And then additionally, there's also property tax and everything else, which means we pay a significant amount of the money we make back to the
And
government.
a lot of that goes back to the fact that the government can't reevaluate property values, because they can only reevaluate it to say, hey, this property in this area that's really really boomed lately is worth higher value. We're going to tax you on it a little more. They can't do that because they can only reevaluate it at point of sale.
Yeah.
Yep, not at point of what's being created on it.
Yeah, we, like, NikNak and I have already kind of talked a little bit more about this, and, like, I would have liked it if, like, hey, it kind of gets updated, I don't know.
Annually?
Maybe, not
Well,
annually.
not annually.
Annually's a lot.
Once a
Like,
decade?
Yeah, maybe
Like the
once
census.
a decade.
Yeah.
But, like, a lot more workers, a lot more people you gotta pay.
We
And
need
it's like,
a lot of people, a lot of
Yeah.
manpower, a lot of time to do something like that on a place this big.
And what politician or focus group is going to come out here and say, hey, landowners, we want to raise your taxes?
Right. Right. That's a good way to not get support from anyone.
I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. No one that owns land is going to back up the repealing of that bill.
I mean, redlining, there are still places where you can find like old house contracts where like people haven't sold their houses in like a century, like it was passed down family to family. They go to sell their house, and then in the original contract for the house there are redlining clauses that have to be taken out legally.
yeah.
That still happens.
Yep.
Yep.
With people who have held onto property for long enough that it still was part of redlining districts.
Like that it was a multi-generational household that
Yep.
families held on for multiple generations.
Yep.
Yeah.
They go to sell it, and then they realize, oh shit, there's actually a clause in our housing contract that's illegal that says we can't sell it to a person of color.
Yeah.
And then they have to have that legally removed
Yep.
and blacked out before the house could be officially sold, even though the contract is technically illegal because the contract was in place before the law went into effect.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of is a little bit of a unique situation to the U.S. because, like, if you
Actually,
consider,
redlining and ghettos are common all over the world.
Sorry, not redlining, but like housing, like the housing market, kind of is a little bit unique. To
Well,
the US,
I
how
think
it is.
in a way it is, and in a way it isn't. For example, if you were to compare the United States to Europe, the housing market is different because Europe builds up. The United States builds out, right?
Yeah.
In most
Yeah.
places. Of course, you would give the exception, like New York is an exception. They build up there instead of out. But in general, for example, Europe has less available land, and so they tend to build up, right? Higher and higher, a lot more apartments.
Yeah.
You wouldn't find like a ton of like single family homes inside the cities like you can in the US. Right? That's not necessarily a rule, though. There are other places in the world where people do build out. Canada also builds out. I mean, I'd say that's another North American example. But there are also places in Asia that build out rather than up.
It's also important to remember this is very uniquely U.S. urban and near urban suburban living. Like obviously, the U.S. does have areas where the housing market
Farms.
is not as
Farmland.
fucked as it is
Yeah.
in California, especially if it's political and
Yeah.
state history and expansion.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
population
because you
density.
would, there are similar sort of exceptions when you look at places like New York, right? It's just that New York is such a unique place, like metropolitan area, with such a large population, such a small amount of space, as opposed to, somewhere where you have a lot of farmland available and people are able to spread out. And of course, a lot of that is linked to the automotive.
Yeah.
The United States was built for cars, not for people.
Yeah.
Along with also like
Meanwhile, most of Europe was built for people because it was built before automotives.
Yes.
And so it has had to be readapted for automotives, and it didn't really work, but they have public transit, so it doesn't matter as much.
along with also like during like the war right there, like Europe kind of had to rebuild. We didn't really have to rebuild, so we didn't actually have to go through some of the growing pains right there that some of the European countries had to go through to rebuild. So yeah.
Yeah, but I would say, I mean, you could find places like the U.S. in other places in the world, like other continents. Like I'm sure there are places like that in
Yeah.
Africa, in Asia, even in Europe to some extent. You can
Australia.
find places that build out instead of up. I mean, another thing is like we live on the West Coast. One of the reasons why we don't build up as much in general here is because earthquakes. Like
Yeah.
we do get regular earthquakes. Our buildings need to be earthquake proof to a certain point. I mean, look at like San Francisco. That city has been literally the Great Fire of what 1908 was a fire that followed an earthquake and basically like leveled a third of the city, killed like half the population. Like we get earthquakes, really large ones. We don't feel them very often, but we do get them. You don't really get that in New York. You have other issues.
Yeah.
So in New York, you can build very, very high. You can build 40-story skyscrapers in New York. You put one of those here in California, chances are it's going to come down faster than it'll go up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get back.
So sorry.
Look, it's not all on topic, but at the very least, we are looking at like societal issues of like the Japanese brand of like community living and apartment urban living.
Oh my god, and Japan has it so much worse because Japan is so small. Japan, by its own nature and population, has to build up, but Japan is also an even bigger earthquake central than the West Coast, and it's tsunami central, right? So Japan has, and it's volcanic, right? Japan has it the worst because they have to build up. It's such a small amount of land with such a large population.
It's the country the size of our state, basically. Probably even smaller.
I think it's smaller.
Probably smaller, honestly.
But, and oh my god, And that's one of those things where when you have to build up like that, eventually you start building up in smaller and smaller areas. And there's a reason why in like big cities in Japan, you won't find like a traditional grid system, right? Like there'll be a lot of like tiny alleyways and stuff shoved into the corners. And it's because you have to find space to build. Even if you're building up, you still have to find. That's why you get those weird apartments that are like triangle shaped, like smallest apartment you've ever seen. Like you walk into the bathroom and then go through a different door into the rest of the apartment. And like that is not necessarily conducive. They're also expensive, right? Like living in Japan is expensive because there's so many people and so little places to live in the cities. It's not to say you couldn't buy like a nice house if you were to move outside of the cities. Like you can buy nice houses outside of the major cities. But oh my goodness, living inside the cities is expensive. It is hard.
Yeah, the problem is also like due to actually how the landmass, like just travel is very much harder as well. So like you could say
travel is easier in Japan because they've got a ton of public transit that lets you get just about anywhere.
Here's the thing, if it's not connected like the public transit system, like if it's like a small town.
Okay, but that's
like,
you would have that same problem anywhere with a public transit system. Public transit systems do not connect every single place in any given. Like you'll always have small villages up in the mountains or like down a river where yes, you do have to like drive or walk a couple hours to get to the nearest city that has a train station. You have those in Europe too.
Yeah.
So you'd have them in Japan.
But here's the thing, I feel it's worse in Japan than it is in like Europe or here because of like just you're just such farther away technically, like in terms of travel.
Disagree. You'd find even worse in Russia. I mean, that's an even bigger country. You can literally get places that are like 2-3 hours from the nearest public transit connection. Like that's I would disagree. I fully believe that there's probably an equal amount of small towns that aren't connected to public transit in Europe as there are in Japan.
Yeah, but also
like just in general.
In Japan, you can't. Like, if you wanted to, you probably could grow that small town elsewhere, where in Japan, you kind of can't really do that. So, yeah.
Why can't you grow the small town? Get more people to move there. Build industry.
Because, like, some places just won't be able to fit the industry that you might
But that's exactly the same as in any small town in Europe. They just won't be able to fit what you need.
Yeah.
I don't think that, at least, I don't know if you two agree with me, I don't find that to be
I mean, we don't live in Japan, so, like, I can't make too much commentary on how the public transit system connects to its smaller areas. Like, because I don't think I've ever heard of a...
Oh, you know what? I've got a nuanced example here, actually. So you know I like urbexing, right? Urban exploration of abandoned places.
Yeah.
So there's two... So I've watched a lot of urbexing in Japan and a lot of urbexing in Europe, right? And I think you're thinking of towns that have like 1 or 2 residents out in the middle of nowhere. They're not building anything new. They're not connected to public transit, right? Those do exist in Europe. Same
Okay.
as in Japan. Like you can like there are hot spring towns in Europe, right? They're up in the mountains, far away from connection to civilization. There's 2 people living there.
Yeah.
All the other buildings are abandoned. They're not connected to public transit. They either have to walk to the next town or get a car. Same thing as in Japan.
My thought is more like you can't really start like a factory right there to like start exporting and bringing in outside
It's
income.
exactly the same as it is in Europe. I mean, look at the abandoned towns in Italy because of the freaking earthquakes there.
Yeah.
There are literally whole cities in the mountains in Italy, right? Unconnected to public transit. 2 or 3 people live there because they refused to leave their homes. But the entire rest of the city was evacuated. All the residents were uprooted, moved to other cities. And so you have fully abandoned cities, 2 or 3 people living there, and they have to own cars because that's the only way that they can get out of the town to go do things. I think absolutely that's the same situation in Europe as it is in Japan. There are just places that are not connected to public transit anywhere you go in the world. Whether you're a place that builds up and not out, or out and not up.
Maybe percentage-wise might be worse for Japan. I don't know. It just feels like that way to me.
There's always going to be unique situations, we'll call it, to like regardless of how far you go, because I mean, even though like roughly 30% of the earth is just only landmass, there's still plenty of that is just unoccupied, and it can be for a multitude of reasons.
We have places like that here in the U.S. too. As someone who watches a lot of urbex and travel videos, like there are cities in the U.S. that are like 6-7 hours from the nearest large city that don't have access to public transit. There's like 20 people living here, you know? Like the whole town subsists on like fishing and like mining. There's like one mine nearby. It's not a large one, and everyone who lives in the town works in the mine. We have those in the U.S. They're rare, but we have them.
Yep.
I thought most of them already ended up dying off.
Most of them did, but we do still have some that are working in effect.
West Virginia.
Country roads, take me home to the place.
Don't copyright.
Where I belong, West Virginia. What is it? No, because recently, so we had massive flooding in the eastern United States recently from Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton.
Yeah, Milton.
Helene and Milton, right? So we use, I think it's quartz to make computer chips,
Yeah.
right?
Silicon.
Sorry, no, but there's a specific type of quartz, I think, that is mined only in a single mine in the eastern United States that is used to make like something that is an integral part of the manufacturing of computer chips. It's
yeah,
the
I
only
know.
mine in the entire world.
Yeah.
One small town, right, works at this mine. Pretty
Yeah.
much everyone in the town who works at this mine. One tiny town. When the hurricanes came, it was completely cut off from access to the rest of the world because the roads were washed away, right?
Yeah.
So that one single town flooding out could have like severely impacted our manufacture of computer chips.
Yeah.
For years.
And they're usually not computer chips, they're actually
No,
clocks.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
no. This place, the quartz. I think it's quartz. I could be wrong, but I saw a video about it. It's not that they're what makes up the chips themselves. They're used in the forging process.
Oh.
And it's and the I think it's quartz. I could be wrong, but it has to have a specific level of clarity, and it's the only mine in the world that produces that gem, that mineral in that clarity. And it's because of the way that North and South America moved, 300 million years ago. It's because of the way that the continental shift worked. It's the only mine in the world that makes it, So we still have places like that all over.
It's why some of those like 20 town population mines still exist to this day, because it's the only place.
And the
where
mines
those-
aren't big enough, and they don't produce enough to need more than 20 people working.
Right.
Yeah.
Just remember, you might be flying by that states with the economy sure isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think that's that's probably it.
This has been an American history and economic and housing discussion with the Anime Club, everybody. I hope you enjoy.
We're not political. Well, NikNak might be political, but we all hate where we live.
Yes.
Yeah. There could be worse. Also, there could be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anything? Oh yeah, we still have to do Waifu Wars.
Waifu
Wars.
Waifu Wars.
Waifu Wars. I've got dibs on Toko Awazaki.
Well, shit.
Get fucked, all of you.
I really don't actually have one. Yeah.
You're lost. Toko's great.
I mean, yeah. To be honest, I also really don't have one for this like series or for this season at least, or at least this set of episodes. I don't really have one myself, honestly.
Look, I'm just gonna stick with Toko Awazaki too. Toko's great in this movie.
Toko is best girl. All right, I have no recommendations. We didn't really talk about like animation or sound or anything.
It's ufotable. It's a little early, but it's still really,
Yeah.
really well done.
Yeah.
Actually, it's UFO table.
Actually, it's ufotable. I don't know how you got that wrong.
And I could wax poetical about how much I love the soundtrack, but I feel like I'd be the only one here.
You know what? It wasn't movie number 1, and therefore I'm happy.
It wasn't bad. I just, it also wasn't really too memorable.
But yeah, like I said, I have no recommendations. Not really. It's not.
It's like it's a pretty unique series in and of itself. And so, like, I mean, obviously, if you're watching this, you probably like the Fate verse already. So,
Or you hate it so much that you want to hear us talk about it instead of watching it yourself. To which I can say, I understand.
Yes.
yeah.
Does anyone have any recommendations?
Not really.
If I'm not wrong, I could be wrong. So I feel like I've heard somewhere that Nasu wrote a lot of the Garden of Sinners stuff with some inspiration from, was it Ghost in the Shell?
Oh.
I can see that.
I
I can
can
see
see
that.
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
Shiki kind of looks pretty similar to the main like girl that you see.
Well, I'd assume that doesn't necessarily mean the looks of the main character. I'd assume that
No.
leans more towards like the story itself and like the
No, I get what
Like the
NikNak
type
is
of
saying.
stories that are being
Yeah.
told.
Like,
yeah.
like I get what NikNak is trying to say here, but also like I just now that you're mentioning it, I see a tiny bit of like character resemblance between Shiki and like the one character. Just
I don't
a little
know if
bit.
I do, but okay.
Just a tiny bit. Not like it's not like clear at a first glance, but like I can see it a little bit if I think.
I think I could see it more in the fact that the Ghost in the Shell movies are very much like Garden of Sinners in that they're not like wholly one-to-one sequential.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of different stories in this world, some with the same characters, some with different characters.
Also, they
Yeah.
typically try and talk a lot about like society. They also have a lot of societal commentary.
Oh,
in
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Hard to not have societal commentary when the plot lines of literal entire movies are the fact that you're being injected with chips that monitor you via the government.
And doesn't it also have a lot of themes of identity and
Yes, because
character
the
growth?
chips also
Yeah,
contain
yeah.
all of your identity, and you know, there's things that the government can do to those chips to wipe you out.
So I don't know for sure. I could be wrong on that one, but that I feel like I've heard that somewhere before.
Cyberpunk, the game.
And then is it worth me going in and saying go read and watch other Type Moon shit?
No,
Nah.
Because
No.
this is like, honestly, like this is so different even from like the Fates that we've watched up to this point that I can't even say that necessarily a Fate fan would go right into this. Like, I mean, obviously you're the resident Fate fan here.
I watched movie 1 and dropped it for like 2 years. So
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, you really just have to kind of appreciate Nasu's whole multiverse of madness, if you would call it.
Oh, when Fate Zero and Unlimited Blade Works were coming out, it wasn't a highly known fact that Garden of Sinners took place in the same world as the Fate series,
Yeah.
or in that same sort of Nasuverse.
Yeah.
So when it came out, people knew it as that really esoteric, well-animated series that Ufotable did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. But eventually it did get around. Oh, this is Nasu's big old multiverse.
yeah.
Yeah. So this yeah, it's really hard for me to like make a recommendation on it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, no. Like, I can't even give, like, I know I brought up Elden Ring, like, as, like, a character similarity for Shiki, but, like, that's, like, a high fantasy, like high/dark fantasy kind of game. This doesn't really, aside from that character comparison, it doesn't really hold up too well.
I think Angry Octopus says it's time for this episode to end. So if y'all will give me a drum roll.
For the next series?
Yes. We'll be watching Uramichi Onisan, Life Lessons with Uramichi Onisan. Which is fucking great. I'm so excited.
This
I'm not going to insist that we watch a trailer for this because I know for a goddamn fact every single one of us saw the memes about this series when it started coming out. Yeah. Every single one of us saw the jokes.
Nope.
Did you? No, because it was like they were really popular memes online for a while. Like people were reacting to like him just being like, life is a lie and children need to realize that.
I'm dead serious.
Bruh, I know I sent them to you.
You probably did, and I don't remember them.
Okay, I know he's seen them because I know I sent them and showed them to you.
You probably did. I, one, probably didn't know that this was from that series at the time, and two, I did not even know it. So.
Right, well, irrelevant. We're not watching a trailer. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
I don't watch memes.